Well, Rising family, welcome back to the Voodoo Quantum Universe. For this edition, we'll be picking up in Chapter 2 and going forward in unpacking or reading through the continual evidence that is being given to us about the quantum nature of our universe and as it relates to the religion or the indigenous practice known as Voodoo. Jumping right into it, we're dealing with the aspect of panpsychic fields and the quantum mechanic itself that manifests or is the backdrop for the reality that we currently live in. And we would go directly into it. It says, the interaction between the observer and the particles through the panpsychic field reveals to us a great wonder in our ordinary reality. Quantum mechanics is revealing to us other dimensions of our common sense reality, dimensions that were heretofore assigned to non-ordinary or alternate realities. The principle of duality of de Broglie is a fact of life, a fact of existence. The wave-particle duality exists at the subatomic level as well as the scale of the human being. Niels Bohr and his school of philosophy has stated repeatedly that the wave-particle duality and the mind-body duality are identical phenomena, and both are subject to the same paradoxes revealed by quantum mechanics. By demonstrating the wave nature of the particle, Louis de Broglie has established once and for all that the basic substance of the particle and of the whole of the universe is energy. That energy, with its multiple manifestations, potential, kinetic, electromagnetic radiations, weak force, strong force, and gravity, is in essence a psychic field. The panpsychic field moves by instantaneous propagation, while light particles move only at 300,000 kilometers per second, a very slow pace in a sense. That slowness resulted from the evolution into mass or particles, such as photon, gluton, weakon, and graviton, that are bundles of energy. The superstrings theory shows that the tiniest particles of matter are incredibly short strings of energy. Those strings of matter coil and join to form 10 other dimensions at the infinitesimal end of the universal scale. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin saw the evolution of the universe toward man as a process of complexification. Thus, the appearance of life and man in the cosmos is not such a freak of nature, a haphazard phenomenon, but a natural end product of complexification, a process that is still at work and will produce in the future a spiritual man. What we observe at the scale of man exists at all levels of the evolutionary ladder. Biological life is only one aspect of life. Man's intelligence is only a remarkable expression at our level of an essence shared by everything in the cosmos. All is life, psychism in motion. Here, quantum mechanics seems to join St. Paul's vitalism in the letter to the Romans and the mysticism of the Far East. According to Otto H. Thiemer, the accompanying wave of a particle is an immaterial quantity stretched over vast regions of space, very distant from the location of the point-like particle. He sees a similitude between the wave and the soul. The wave should be the soul or the mind of the photon or the electron. The mass of the particle would be analogous to our body. Thiemer sees the relationship as two separate, different entities married together like the addition of 1 + 1 = 2. But the real dualism of quantum physics is 1 + 1 = 1, and such is a common property of the whole cosmos. Space-time began as energy or force and was essentially life, psychism in motion. It has evolved towards Homo sapiens and will evolve further into an omega state, a spiritual man in the Pauline vision. Add note, Pauline being Paul of the Bible in the New Testament. It is wrong to equate mind only as a result of physiochemical processes, but rather it is the physiochemical processes that are various manifestations of mind or the panpsychic field. The fact is that we can equate the functions of our mind to the wave function of the particle. From a particle point of view, we can speak of the mind as the physiological function of the biological entity man, functioning among many other functions such as circulatory, excretory, digestive, and reproductive function. But all these functions are manifestations of the psychic field, which is the essence of existence. Thus, our mind-body duality is two different expressions of a unique essence. Our body is composed of packets, bundles, or quanta of energy, giving us a location, a position in space-time, while at the same time, the wave function aspect is all over the cosmos continuum. At times, the wave function of our composite self can act as a completely separate entity, and probably can survive the death or disaggregation of particles forming our body or massive state. This will open the door for an insight into the paradoxical phenomena taking place in the alternate reality of the Voodoo, as their wave function persists in composite states with the body double. Quantum reality and its paradoxes do not exist only at the atomic level of existence. It is present in biology alongside the classical laws of causality. Most of the mechanisms governing biological entities are controlled by electrochemical processes that encompass huge numbers of atoms and macro molecules. In the 50 million cells that compose the body of a newborn, 6 trillion reactions take place in each cell every second. Many of them are deterministic in nature or follow the laws of cause and effect. However, according to the quantum theory, nature and biology in particular are not deterministic in all details. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle imposes a limit on how accurately we can obtain knowledge of the nature through our scientific methodology. For its more popular expression, Heisenberg's principle states that the position and the momentum of a particle cannot be measured with accuracy. It seems that the tenets of classical mechanics break down when the system is too small. A detailed description of an electron orbit within the small system is impossible. This limitation is intimately associated with the fact that the probe or instrument used is a particle of the same size and the mass as object under scrutiny. Thus, it is the perturbation of the object induced by the probe that is responsible for the unavoidable errors. Some philosophers, opposed to the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, claim that the uncertainty principle is not correct. But Bohr and Heisenberg, after experiencing with many measuring processes, remain adamantly convinced that the uncertainty principle is valid in all cases. Thus, the epistemological implications of Heisenberg principles are the provisory value of our science and the boundary constraints imposed on our methodologies. Like many scientists before them, the Copenhagen theories tend to extrapolate very much. Most scientists would agree with them that between the two sets of laws governing the world, classical and quantum, the latter is more basic and fundamental. When the Euclidean/Newtonian universe appears to dominate, it is because of change in scale. But a statement like "there is no reality until that reality is perceived" is too metaphysical in nature, or a statement that all classical ideas about the world had to be abandoned is too unilateral and ignores the dialectics of nature. This is true particularly after Bohr had discovered an exciting feature of the new physics, that it applied just where it was necessary. When the world and its dimensions appear to be continuous, the rules of quantum correspond with the classical rules. This is known as the principle of correspondence. In our everyday transactions with our fellow men, it is the classical rules that appear to predominate. But from time to time, the quantum manifestation will erupt your common sense reality to overcome the cause and effect sequences. This is what is called a causality violation, or to reverse the space-time arrow in the premonitory kick by letting the future coincide with the present. We will see in more detail later on this phenomenon in which the future determines the past or the present. Another corollary or principle of correspondence in the principle of duality composite states as Bohr's principle of complementarity. The paradoxical nature of these principles created some uneasiness in the minds of many physicists, including Bohr himself, who finally accepted them when he discovered the principle of complementarity, which acted as a safety valve against the untoward effects or harmful features, the paradoxes in observable phenomena. The rationale was just that this principle implies that superstition or composite states with several different mutually incompatible qualities exist only in the mathematical abstraction of quantum theory, and is not conducive or contradictory observable phenomena. The composite state collapses under measurement and cannot be perpetuated. The principle of complementarity redeems the situation of incompatibility by postulating that in any experiment a particle behaves either as pure wave or pure particle. Bohr's conviction is that the principle of complementarity is one of the most fundamental philosophical tenets that govern our universe. He thinks that opposites, like living cells and inanimate matters, body and mind, causality and free will, are mutually exclusive in the realm of observable phenomena, being controlled by boundary constraints of the principle of complementarity. However, Bohr's exploration on the principle of complementarity's restraining power is not all-powerful in every domain of nature. In biology, the superposition or composite states are everyday occurrences. Viruses are preliminary life forms, their inanimate matter structure while being living organisms. Microbiologists seem to think that viruses are regressive forms of unicellular organisms confined into parasitism. However, they would well represent the transitory step from inanimate matter to cellular life forms. Here are the superposition principle leads to harmony and permanent or transitory coexistence of opposites. In the realm of medicine, it is at the core of many abnormal entities that are harmful. The loss of blood in causality fashion leads to low blood pressure and eventually to shock when the hemorrhage is massive and fast. In anemia, which is also blood loss induced at a slower pace, we observe the paradoxical high blood pressure. Heart failure is usually associated with low output in blood circulation, but in overactive thyroid and in anemia, we can observe a high output failure. With swelling or massive fluid retention seen in liver failure or heart failure, we can observe kidney failure on the basis of lack of liquid going to the kidney. Dehydration is often causally related to salt depletion, but paradoxically, we often observe a dehydrated individual with high salt. Also, some dehydrated patients can come with very high blood pressure when we would expect low blood pressure. This paradoxical situation is caused by the response of a chemical system whose job is to retain salt when sensors warn depletion. The treatment of the hypertension is not a fluid pill, but an intravenous fluid administration. In a dreadful condition called DIC, which is disseminated intravascular coagulation, people begin bleeding when paradoxically a blood clot formation is taking place all over their body. The treatment consists, among many other things, to administer heparin, a blood thinner that usually makes people bleed. The reason behind that composite state in the fact that the disassembled clot formation are using up their clotting factors, and the process must be stopped by heparin. In the disorder called hypothyroidism, which is an underactive thyroid, hypothyroidism, the individual becomes nonchalant, numb, quiet, and lethargic to the point that sometimes he does not drink or eat. We have observed situations in which the patient becomes violent, loud, and agitated. This is called low thyroid madness, and the treatment and administration for a deficient thyroid hormone. On a familiar ground, in sugar diabetes, we have an organism full of calories of sugar while the patient is losing weight, like in starvation. and a dreadful complication of diabetes called hyperosmolar state, the individual blood sugar may be in the range of 900 milligrams to 1300 milligrams per decimeter. If it goes untreated, the patient will lose a tremendous amount of weight in a few days. The paradox comes from the fact that the calories are available, but they are not used up. This is like a millionaire who cannot use his money to pay his bills. An autoimmune disease such as lupus, an individual's own defense mechanisms turn their heavy weapons against him because they identify him, paradoxically, as the enemy. Health itself is a typical composite state. In order to maintain that happy state of good health, the paradoxical war is waging at every instant on all fronts in and outside the body, against a very large variety of aggressors, microbes, toxins, pollutants, and diverse physiochemical invaders. In our space-time, particularly in the common sense reality, everything around us seems to follow the law of cause and effect. The classical science erected in that same spatial-temporal reality is governed by the same principle of causality. The world is a system of particles in submission to the laws of classical mechanics and electrodynamics. The positions and the velocities of all particles in the cosmos are given at one time, and they are determined by the laws of nature for the future as well as the past. Those measurements determine the state of the universe, including infatuation of guys and beautiful girls. Thus, the fate of the cosmos is rigidly established by the laws of nature throughout past, present, and future. By virtue of that principle of causality, everything is predetermined and occurs in accordance with the laws of nature. A mammoth sophisticated computer called the Beast, by the doomsday prophets of the one world order under the Antichrist, would be able to store all of the present information about the world and predict every future present. Pause. This book was written some 20 years ago. Almost 20 years ago. And in this book, he talked about the world supercomputer, quote unquote, the Beast, which is what we know of as today by the time this is being recorded and dispensed to you all, as those D-Wave computers and or the CERN particle machine. Just a point there. The gentleman here was aware of these things taking place well before they crossed into the mainstream. And this is a Voodoo priest and / PhD. So just take that in for a second to realize how much is going on before us that we do not even know that this gentleman here has actually slipped in right in front of us intermittently as he's trying to unpack quantum mechanics by saying that he can essentially grasp hold of future events using his voodoo background in a similar sense that these supercomputers, these D-Waves, and these CERNs are attempting to replicate in a computer fashion that religiously has already been accomplished in these ancient traditions. All right, back to the book. For many authorities in classical physics, scientific explanation is the explanation of the principle of causality. Science not based on that principle is inconceivable. However, quantum physics came with a different view of the world and stated that nature is not deterministic in all details and spoke of this breakdown of causality. Quantum mechanics as a statistical theory can only assign probabilities of occurrence. The actual values of particle positions, velocities, and others cannot be predicted or determined by the laws of physics with total accuracy. Furthermore, beyond that indeterminacy, the new physics was claiming that the natural sequence of cause and effect could be reversed in a topsy-turvy manner. Einstein's theory of relativity was there to prove that such an occurrence is not of this world. For example, of the rifle fired at a target, an observer can witness 4 possibilities, depending on his own traveling time. If he is in a supersonic jet going at the matching speed of the bullet, the latter would seem to be at a standstill, and the target would be racing towards the bullet. If his jet sped up and moved faster than the bullet, the latter would appear to move backwards while still advancing towards the target. Now, if the bullet moves at twice the speed of light, while our jet is flying at half the speed of light, we would see the rifle firing the bullet, reaching the target at the exact same time. But if our jet reached a speed of light greater than half light speed, we would see the whole scene running backwards. The target would explode, sending the bullet back towards the mouth of the rifle, where it would penetrate the barrel and resume the quiet status of an undischarged ammunition. That last situation illustrates what is called causality violation. The cause comes after the effect. But because such a he-or-see cannot exist, something moving faster than light, causality violation is impossibility. Tachyons do not exist in our ordinary reality. However, the EPR paradox has shown that simultaneous events can occur in different locations of two objects that were previously in contact, like the Corsican brothers. You should look that up. That's Corsican, C-O-R-S-I-C-A-N, brothers. In other words, quantum mechanics could allow an observation of a physical quantity of one of a pair of previously connected particles to create a similitude in the other particle or object. The two forms formerly connected would be light years apart, but as soon as an observation is measured on one of them, the second would immediately assume similar value. This connection is baptized, interesting word choice, baptized by Fred Alan Wolf as the Einstein connection. It has been concluded that something, quote unquote, must go from the location of the first particle or object to the second one, and that, quote unquote, something moves with a speed faster than light. It is the tachyonic panpsychic field. That field establishes the connection and creates the similitude. There is no cause and effect relation between the two occurrences. Observers located in the opposite time orders can view the first object as the cause of the second, or the second as the cause of the first. And to have it simply put, in regards to the four situations that were presented, essentially he's saying if you had the ability to travel faster than the speed of light, which is the grid speed for what we experience here in this reality, if you were somehow able to travel faster than the speed of light, you would actually be able to witness events taking place in a backwards fashion. You would literally be able to essentially see the future. And it makes sense that you would be able to see the future because you are literally traveling at a speed that is faster than the time itself where things can actually manifest in. So if things are actually happening, you see them from a reverse angle or an upside down angle, the similar way as if you look into the round end of a spoon. You hold the spoon directly up, and based on the viewpoint that you have, the trajectory of your eyelids as it observes the spoon and bounces back towards you, it shows the image upside down. In a similar fashion, this is what is being alluded to when they talk about tachyonic fields and things of that nature. You travel at a speed so fast that your position of observation, meaning the eyeballs that you use to take in reality, cannot take it in fast enough, and the only thing that it can interpret is seeing it upside down so that your brain can actually catch up with what is taking place. And as it catches up with what is taking place, because it is viewed as upside down, it will play it in reverse. Back to the book. The physicist John A. Wheeler's double slit experiment with a light source and a rotary, non-permanent, light-sensitive, film emulsion screen mounted on the back of the slits illustrates causality violation. That screen can be raised up to capture a photon or lowered to let the photon continue its journey until it reaches one of two telescopes placed directly along the back line of each slit. The experimenter obtains an interfering pattern in which he raises the screen because a single photon has passed through both slits. When he leaves the screen down, the photon passes through one slit and reaches the telescope in line with that slit. and that telescope measures the particle-like property of the photon. So far, this is business as usual, but here's the rub. The screen isn't rotated into position until after the particle has journeyed through the slits. The experimenter has made up his mind at the very last minute. In spite of that delay, his choice determines the path of the photon. The effect has come before the cause. The cause is the late choice of the experimenter, and the effect is the path already taken in advance by the photon. In that breakdown of causality, the future is determining the past. Could this be explained by the influence of the tachyonic psychic field? The physicist John G. Kramer of the University of Washington has another interpretation. It is called the transactional interpretation. Kramer has stipulated that the quantum wave is a real physical wave that propagates through space-time. That wave is always associated with a conjugate wave, which is also real, but with a time twist. It runs backwards through time and collapses back at the source. Thus, it interacts with the quantum wave and modulates it. Kramer labels the original quantum wave an officer wave and the conjugate wave an echo wave. In the case John A. Wheeler's experiment, it is the conjugate echo wave that passes through both slits backward from the future towards the past and is received by the light source. If the screen is down, the officer wave passes again through both slits towards the telescopes. If the screen is up, it absorbs the photon and the film emotion and sends back through time a conjugate echo wave passing through the slits and received by the light source. The panpsychic field is more conducive to the spiritual phenomenon occurring in our world, but belonging to the dimensions of non-ordinary reality. In Christian mysticism, the ritual of baptism established a quantum connection between the resurrected Messiah and the believer, so that their fate is intimately sealed forever. Prayer is an instantaneous propagation of information going at tachyonic speed. That connection opens the door to a dimension outside space-time called eternity. The Hindu devotee who touches or looks at an icon does that with the purpose of establishing a link between the god and himself. Thus, the mandira, or temple, is a sacred place where the two realities intersect and intertwine. Though the devotions of puja ritual at home, through the devotions of puja ritual at home, the devotee establishes an intimate contact with the deity by bathing, adorning, touching, and seeing the icon. That link is a quantum connection that seals the destiny of the devotee to that god. In Hongian or Bokor, alternate reality, quantum connection enters in the formulation of amulet, wanga, a spell, or lycanthropism. In the Honsi, our initiate has a very tight connection with the Loa deity that requires a special ritual to separate them at the adept's death. This ritual is known under the name of Desoni. John G. Kramer's transactional interpretation of quantum events can be applied to more mundane or familiar occurrences of everyday life, such as the premonitory kick. That quantum event is very prevalent in the Haitian mental construct. It also exists in other cultures in Europe and America with some variants. It is supposed to be a warning system. When I inadvertently kicked my right foot against something, I received notice of a bad omen. Something disagreeable is going to happen. When I kicked my left foot against something, it is a notice of a good omen. For most people in my country, it is the other way around. It is that way with me because I am left-handed. I have been experiencing it from my childhood on to adulthood. Like everything in Quiffland, the word used of Fred Allen Wolf, it is affected by indeterminacy. It is very capricious, and we can go for months or weeks without experiencing it, and one day suddenly it is back into our life. So many of us have learned to ignore it. Here are a few examples. I'm on my way to the library to obtain a book that I want badly as a reference. As I am about to enter my car, I inadvertently kick my right foot. Ballooning. I hope this is not true. I need that book badly. Quote, when I get to the library, I am diligently helped by an attendant who swears that the book is a part of their collection. We cannot find it on the shelf, but it is listed on their computer. So I go home without the book. Quote, gee, I should have stayed at home in the first place and saved myself some gasoline. Next example. I am getting ready to have breakfast. A dish with a golden sunny side up egg. As I approach the table, I inadvertently kick my right foot against something. I pause for a moment. What could it be? What is in store? I hope my breakfast is not spoiled, or the telephone is not going to ring with some bad news. But on contemplating the beautiful sunny side up, it comes to me that some of the egg can splash over my tie and my white shirt. So I pick up a paper towel and place it over my tie and in front of the shirt, and I go on and enjoy a good breakfast. Of course, when I am done, there are a few drops of grease over the paper towel, and I am glad that I could prevent the bad omen. After all, that premonitory kick was good for something. I protected my immaculate white shirt from accidental splashes of grease or yolk. I go upstairs to brush my teeth, and I suddenly freeze when I see myself in the mirror. I had a big splash of grease and yolk on my left sleeve. Damn it! Que sera, sera. End quote. I cannot undo the seal of fate. I cannot undo the future. And pause. He cannot unseal his fate or undo his future, but he could listen to his premonitory kick and be mindful that he should prepare for what is coming next. Here, the transactional interpretation of quantum events can be applied. It is also an illustration of the bidirectional arrow of time. Like an equation, time moves in two directions. E equals mc squared, goes both ways from left to right and from right to left. In other words, time moves from the past to the future and from the future to the past. In my premonitory kick, an offer wave moves from the time when the sunny side up was splashed on the table, the present, to the future when I am going to splash my shirt with egg and grease. The warning received is the echo wave that moves from the future to the present. All my precautions were an attempt to undo the transaction, but I failed miserably. Someone may think that the premonitory kick is just a coincidence exaggerated by superstition. This is possible. However, the quantum dimension has room for both. The superstition is a belief that modulates the reality around the believer. It gives currency to the reality of the superstition. Thus, in Afro-Haitian culture, the premonitory kick is a fact of life. Furthermore, as coincidence, the kick falls into a certain realm of Carl Jung's synchronicity, eerie simultaneous occurrences that are expression of the pluridimensional extrasensory perception. What is the moral of the story? We cannot undo or influence the future when it is sealed by the transaction of quantum waves. That transaction is a modulation obtained by multiplying the offer wave with its conjugate echo wave. And the outcome is physical currency, an event that we cannot undo because of boundary constraints. Although our subjectivity plays a great role in the construct of reality, it can do so only within certain limits. The best I could do was to spare my tie, a shirt a few drops of grease. But the main event, the big splash, could not be prevented in this type of probability. Thus, knowing the future in quantum land is not worth the effort and worry. Only predictions can be made in the classical world of Newton and the lucid, and can be changed or transformed to some extent. The weather predictions on televisions can help us to evacuate on time or to look for shelter, but even then the predictions are not always successful. Science fiction themes of going back into the past to undo some event in order to prevent some future happening is pure fantasy. It cannot be done within the realm of our dimensions. We will see later how an unknown dimension outside of space-time continuum can change the past, present, and future. The offer and echo wave transaction can be seen as the localization of the panpsychic field near the EPR paradox. The wave function of my body-soul duality extends over the whole universe into the present, the past, and the future. The premonitory kick is a local transaction for a specific event. The transactional waves move at tachyonic speed over space-time continuum. I was aware of the omen many minutes or hours before it actually materialized itself as space-time event. The existence of that panpsychic field is also responsible for other transactional quantum events such as prophecy, precognition, retrocognition, telepathy, and Telinsky, exhibited by individuals such as Moses, the lawgiver, Elijah, the Christian Messiah, the apostles, Nostradamus, Edgar Cayce, and others to name a few. The French seer Nostradamus could record quantum probabilities 500 years before they actually occurred, such as the advent of Adolf Hitler and the use of atomic weapons in World War II. When he wrote down the verses of his quantrain, a causality violation took place. The future coalesced with the past and the present as a whole. Hence the notion of unbroken wholeness of the entire universe expounded by David Bohm, the author of the book Quantum Theory. The panpsychic dimension of reality allows the composite states of locality and non-locality, of brokenness and unbrokenness, separated and non-separated. The quantum link between all things in this universe explains how any 2 points in space and time are both separated and not separated at the same time. According to Einstein's special theory of relativity, when points are connected by the signals going at speeds slower than that of light, the points are seen as separated. When they reach the speed of light, those signals lose their meaning as space and time coalesce. This is the dialectics of space and time. They exist as we know them in ordinary reality because of our slow pace. But even there, my wife's time is more rigid than mine. She claims that I'm always late and she is always on time. I guess my notion of space is also. In the realm of ordinary reality, such postulates as I am the whole universe, quote, is symptomatic of a schizophrenic mental status, bordering on insanity. When the Egyptian pharaoh equates himself with the empire, or Louis the 14th with the state of France, or Francois d'Arvillers with the Republic of Haiti, or Father Bertrand Astride with the people, they present us a composite or complementary state. The health status of a pharaoh was a mirror to the viability of the empire. If he was too old and feeble, he was supposed to be put to death and replaced by a young heir. Later on, that dreadful fate was mutated into ritual of death and rebirth of Pharaoh, which is a prototype for the redemptive work of the Christian Messiah to save the world. This is all possible in quantum land, but the concrete arm of composite state engages to be very cautious in order to prevent the deleterious effects for the environment and for us. The king or the president will soon discover that his will is not necessarily the will of the empire or the people. The mass suffering of the dictatorship of Duvalier could not wish away his departure or overthrow. The Duvalier dynasty lasted 30 years. The Duvalier's regime was not eradicated by quantum means, but by the three-dimensional coup d'etat. If the power of wave function was at work in the overthrow, considering that the people were wishing him out from the first month of his reign, it took the quantum choice 30 years to manifest itself. Indeed, reality is a matter of choice, but the choices are circumscribed and limited within certain confines. And we will see later how some of the boundaries can be overcome in the alternate reality of the Voodoo. And that concludes our reading for the Voodoo Quantum Universe, the magic of quantum reality. I am your reader and host, Pharaoh Brown. This is We Meditate. Be well, family.